Welcome to this demonstration of Lextree for entity management. Lextree is an online platform from Berkman Solutions for helping to manage compliance, org charts, organizational documents related to legal entities from any jurisdiction in the world and with any form of organization. We'll start on the dashboard. I want to note that I'm logged in as a fictional user named Frank Keller. Frank's access to legal entities and his rights to do certain things in the product with those entities are limited by the permissions and controls that have been set up in the settings area. So for purposes of this demo, he'll have wide latitude. Frank might be a corporate paralegal, in-house counsel, business lawyer, finance professional in private equity or a family office that has access to all of the legal entities in this particular configuration. We'll start on the dashboard briefly before we get to the Entities tab, which is where the heart of the matter is. On the dashboard, we'll see an initial display of all of our requirements. Requirements in Lextree are any compliance filing or obligation, the most common of which is an annual report, but any other filing in any jurisdiction would be broadly classified as a requirement. So any trade name or DBA filing in a particular jurisdiction, foreign authorizations, any even signing authorities for in some jurisdictions, anything that has to do where there is usually a date imposed for a filing or obligation at any kind of frequency. We'll explore requirements in more detail when we get there. The dashboard will display all of our requirements by jurisdiction. Now in this example, I just have 4, and it just so happens that there's 1 in each, so there's an even number in all those jurisdictions. But what I want to point out here is that these jurisdictions are, we can support both national jurisdiction filings like Singapore or Brazil or Switzerland or Luxembourg, as well as subnational filings. So in the United States, for example, all legal entities are managed at the state level. There is no federal filing. But there also are hybrid jurisdictions like Canada where there's both a provincial and a federal filing. All of that can be supported in Lextree. The second thing to note here is that only the jurisdictions that you care about are displayed here in the dashboard. Lextree will adapt, and you can configure the jurisdictions that you want to display. So you can certainly support any jurisdiction in the world, but only the ones where you're actively doing business or your entities are registered will show up here. I can see any annual reports that are due in the next rolling year, this year, next year. They'll show the jurisdiction and when those are due, and then any other requirements. So in this example, this is interesting. There's a construction permit in this example for some real estate holding company that has some construction permit, and it has that permit is coming up for renewal or something sometime soon. Over here on this side, we'll see any alerts that are coming due this month or next month. An alert is an email notification from Lextree. So it is, Lextree is going to send us an automatic notification. In this case, it is about that construction permit we were just looking at a moment ago. We'll get an email to all those people. We'll look at those alerts in more detail in a little bit. This will just give us an on-screen presentation of what's coming due. And you can, of course, go see all of the alerts for the entire system for every entity if you want. We'll explore that in a little bit. And then tasks will show us any tasks that we've been assigned or are participating in and what the status and process is with those tasks. And we'll assign some of those in a little bit. So with that, we'll move on from the dashboard and look at the entities, which is the primary corporate registry for all of the entities in the corporate families that we're managing. And so you'll see I'm on the Entities tab. There are only 36 in this example. Lextree is used by large multinational corporations and private equity firms where there are hundreds or thousands of legal entities. Some clients have a handful, some have many, and everything in between. It really doesn't matter. And the nice thing is that Lextree licensing allows for unlimited legal entities. So it doesn't matter whether you have a handful or hundreds or thousands of them. The pricing doesn't change based on the number of legal entities. And so, of course, I can search on any of these columns and sort on any of them that I want. I can even change the columns that are displayed. Lextree will show us some additional options here that we can turn on to display those columns, and we can search in those things. So for example, if I want to find, I have these tags here where I've listed the family office and corporate client, etc. And in this case, we will just say, I want to look for all the family office properties. And here are all of the family office ones. There's only 13 of them. And then we can go and look at any of those. So we'll start by adding a brand new entity, and then we'll go look at one that has a little more detail and will allow us to sort of see some with some fuller information in it. But let's add one just to start with. So we'll click add, and we'll say new US Corp, and we'll just call it Inc. Obviously a fictional corporation. And then we'll pick a jurisdiction. Lextree will display only the jurisdictions that we've set up to be displayed here. Again, we can add any jurisdiction we want, just say new option, and we can pick any of those jurisdictions that we want. So for example, I can come here and say, we'll pick Sweden as an example. If we wanted to add a province or region, a sub-national jurisdiction in Sweden, we certainly could. But we'll just add Sweden, and now Sweden is in our list of jurisdictions, and that one change will be there now permanently. So anytime we need to call upon a jurisdiction, Sweden will be one of our options. But in this case, we'll say Delaware in the United States is our jurisdiction of incorporation. And Lextree will ask for the form of organization. These forms of organization are fully customizable by you, and you can set those up in the settings area, and we can support any jurisdiction in the world. In this case, we'll choose a corporation. If we want, we can enter a legal address. We can have a separate headquarters address if we want. I will skip that for now. We'll go take a look at how it shows up in more detail and where that will appear. You can also link and build a library of registered agents if you want. So if you have a handful of registered agents and most of your entities are using one of those, that can appear in a dropdown, and you can add a new registered agent here as well. We'll choose an incorporation date, and we'll just say the October 1st of this year. We have a place to enter other names, so you can enter trade names here, although if you're actually managing a doing business as or DBA name or alternative name where there is some registration associated with it, there's another place I recommend managing this information. But if there are alternate spellings that you want to keep track of or whatnot, this is a common place for doing that. If you are filing or this entity has a global legal entity identifier number, this is an example of a custom field. So you can add unlimited custom fields even in the standard business plan in Lextree. This is an example of one where we've added an LEI number for this particular entity, and we might enter a number for that LEI number if we wanted there. And you can have unlimited numbers of those sort of custom fields. Tags allow further classification of the entity. So there are lots of options, and you'll see we have these tags: corporate client, family office, and startup. But you might say add other tags. So for example, we could add a tag of holding company, and we could add another tag called taxable. And maybe we want, just to round things out, we'll add a tag for an operating company. And in a minute, I will clean this particular one up, but I just want to add these examples in here. We'll add a pass-through tax status. So obviously we won't have all of these things here, but if we wanted to say that this was a taxable operating company, we could add tags for taxable and operating. When you add tags to Lextree, it's automatically changing the reporting infrastructure, and you can run reports now to say, show me all of my operating companies, show me all of my taxable entities or pass-through or holding, and those will all permanently be there. And even though I'm removing them from this entity, you can see that they are now in my list of tags, and I can always add them. So I'm going to add, this is part of a corporate client, and we'll say it's taxable, and we'll say it's operating as well. And then you can add notes about the entity, whatever you want to say here. And then finally, Lextree is going to ask for the group, and the group determines what other users can see this entity. So this is an important part of the security infrastructure of Lextree. We'll cover that in more detail during the administrative portion of the presentation, But what I'm doing now is choosing who can access this entity. And right now, I have only this one default group. Later, we'll add a new group, but you could have different groups and then partition entities among those groups and allow users to only see those. One common example for our global clients is that they will set up groups by geographic region. So you might have North America, Europe, Asia, Africa, for example, and then assign entities to those groups and then only people in those regions with access to those entities. And what that means is someone in the Asia group will only see the Asian legal entities. They won't even be aware of the North American entities, for example. But in this case, I'm just going to add it to the default group and we'll save all that information. So Lextree will display our new legal entity. So here we have new US Corp Inc. It's a Delaware corporation, has an incorporation date, status. Here's that LEI number we added. Here are those tags we added, my initial notes about it. Now, Lextree will adapt the presentation of information based on what it knows. So for example, I did not enter an address of any kind, and so it's not going to display that address information. If I were to add that at any point, Lextree would display it in this top panel. So the top panel is the summary information about the entity. And then down here we have documents, requirements, ownership, people or management officers and directors, alerts, tasks, and notes. And we'll have add buttons under all of these. I will go look at an entity with more information in it so that we can see what each of these looks like in a little more detail. But that's basically adding a new entity. It's very straightforward. So we'll come back to our list of legal entities, and you'll see here is our new US Corp, the brand new one we just added at the top of our list. So let's come in and look at an entity. Maybe we'll look at this Real Prop Holdings. So this one is has this information here. We have an address, we have a jurisdiction. It is a limited liability partnership. It was incorporated a while ago. It has its own LEI number and it's part of this corporate client group as well. In the documents area, you'll notice that there are two documents. There's an employment agreement and some bylaws, and they're listed here. You'll notice that the bylaws have a date for the bylaws, but it has no effective or expiration date, and that's because often organizational documents don't have effective and expiration dates. However, an employment agreement might very well have effective and expiration dates. So if this is a legal entity where some of the officers and directors have employment agreements, then we can actually upload them, give them expiration dates. And once we do that, we can get alerts and notifications about those. So let's do this. We're going to add a new document, and then what we'll do is we'll set up an alert for that new document. So Lextree has this concept of folders, or really collections of documents. There's not subfoldering, but it is a collection, and these collections can be whatever you want of any kind. So we will say this is an agreement, and we just might say this is a commercial lease for one of its properties, and it'll ask what jurisdiction again. I want to point out first that Sweden is in our list because we added that earlier in the process. But let's imagine that this particular one, relates to New York. And it'll ask us what type of document. So these types are also fully customizable and configurable by you. You can customize them any way you want. And we'll see, we don't have a good example here, so we'll just choose other for now. And then you can upload or link to the document. So you can actually save a copy of the document to Lextree and upload it to us, in which case we'll handle the security and protection of that document. Or you can simply link to it and leave it in whatever location you have it, whether that's another document management system, internal file directory, doesn't matter, you can link to that. In this case, we'll upload the document and we will just come and go. You can navigate anywhere where you can get to on your computer, and we'll just choose sample. Just choose sample document. and it'll ask for the date, and we're going to include a document term. So we're going to actually change this date. We'll make this first of the month, and we'll add a document, and we'll say it is effective here, and we'll say that it goes out a couple of years. And then I can add notes about the document if I want. So by turning on this document term, I can now set an alert for this document. And the way alerts work in Lextree is they're the same functionality I'm about to show you works in a wide variety of places and is an important part of the compliance and notification infrastructure inside Lextree. So Lextree will default by saying we want to alert 30 days before the expiration date and don't repeat that alert. But you may want to change that. So you may want the alert to actually come out 60 days before. You could actually even do it after the expiration if you chose. If it was an NDA, for example, and there was a post-expiration cleanup provision, you might set the alert for after that. But we'll choose before the expiration. And we actually want this alert to repeat. Now, we can't annoy everyone and send an alert every single day for 60 days, but let's not do that. Let's instead say every 2 weeks. So what this means is starting 60 days before December 1st, 2021, Lextree will start sending notifications 60 days before that, and will do that every 2 weeks until December 1st, 2021. And those alerts will just go out automatically. And then I can send that alert to anyone we want. So I can send it to anyone in our organization or even externally. So Lextree allows you to send email notifications from alerts to anyone you want. They do not have to be users. They do not have to be in your organization. They will only get an email notification. I'm not giving these people access to the product or the record, but they will get a notification about this particular document related to this entity. And then we can always add someone new here as well if we want. And then we can even add a custom message, and we can say this. And whatever information you want. And you can modify what that looks like. You can add images and videos, tables, all sorts of formatting options for those custom messages. And what Lextree will do is package up basic information about this document and entity along with this custom message and send it to these people that you've set up on this schedule that you've configured as well. And so we'll save that document. And once that's saved, we're back on our Documents tab. The lease is here. Here's the jurisdictional information, a link to the document, and then that information along with the alert information. So you'll notice with the employment agreement, we are not set up to get an alert, but we are in the case of the commercial lease. And so that's document management inside of Lextree. Now in the requirements area, we have the ability to set up annual reports or statements, as well as any other requirement. So as I mentioned earlier, in this construction permit, we have this New York permit. This is a permit for some construction project. Notice it is recurring, and we get an alert every 30 days before it happens. And so we can set up requirements with those that recurring frequency. So let's set up an example. I'm going to set up an annual statement or report for this organization. And so we'll say, LP filing. And we'll again just choose New York. And the requirement types are fully customizable. So you'll notice that other one was a permit. That's because we configured it to have requirement types called permits, and instead we'll choose filing. Lextree will ask us if this is an annual report or statement. Many of our clients in different jurisdictions actually have multiple annual reports in different jurisdictions. And to be able to do that in Lextree, all you have to do is check this box. You can even copy that incorporation information, or you can set up an entirely new annual report or filing. I'm going to say, yes, this is. I'm also going to say, yes, I want to copy my incorporation information just to simplify it. And I can add any details or notes about that if I want. I will say that the due date is 2/1/2. And we'll even say this is recurring, and it recurs maybe every 2 years. Now, this filing in New York, this is just an example, may not recur every 2 years, but even any requirement, whether it's an annual statement report or any other kind, you can set up whatever frequency you want. So they can be days, weeks, years. It doesn't really matter. It's very flexible. So in this example, we're going to have a quote unquote annual statement due every 2 years. And yes, I want an alert for that. And we'll just stick with the 30 days before, and I want to remind myself. So I will just say that it's 30 days before and do not repeat. What's powerful about this is that Lextree is going to do a couple of things for us. So first of all, on the initial due date, the February 1st, 2020 date, Lextree is going to, in 30 days in advance of that, it's going to send us a notification. So in January, we're going to get a notification about this alert. And then on February 1st, 2020, Lextree is going to automatically update the due date to 2022, adding those 2 years that we just configured here. And then it's also going to reset the alerts so that come January 2022, Lextree will again send us an email notification about the new requirement due date. So you only have to configure the due date, the frequency, and the alert one time, and then Lextree will handle that notification and that updating automatically in perpetuity until you make a change. And we could add a message if we wanted to before, but we won't do that in this example. So now here we are on the requirements, and you'll see we have our LLP filing for New York, and it's the registered name. All this information just got copied automatically because I said I wanted to copy it. It's recurring every 2 years. We get an alert 30 days before the due date, and the status is active. So very powerful, easy way to track annual reports, but also any compliance filing or obligation of any kind. So requirements get used in so many different ways. They get used for signing authority, they get used for DBA or trade name filings, foreign authorizations, special licenses, special permits, anything you need to sort of track a notification or a filing about the requirements is probably a good place to go to do that. That's requirements. The next tab is the ownership tab, and ownership accomplishes a number of things for us. Lextree builds organizational charts automatically. So you don't have to draw a corporate org chart anymore and hope you get it right and hope it's up to date. Lextree will build a current live organizational chart based on the most recent data automatically for you. And we can handle very complex situations, what we call generation skipping, and many other complex ownership structures. All that's done automatically. All you have to do in Lextree is enter the immediate parents and the immediate subsidiaries. Lextree does all of the rest to build that organizational chart. So in this example, there are two parents of real property holdings, Pacific Refining and Asia Pac Distribution. One owns 35%, the other owns 25%. Yes, I know these are whole numbers. Yes, they can handle fractional ownerships as well. And we have these subsidiaries that are owned in part by real property holdings. Now, what you can do with Lextree to add additional owners is really simple. We just click the Add button, and this will open some powerful functionality for you in Lextree. So first is, Lextree will say, do you want to add a parent or a subsidiary of real property holdings? And in this case, we can choose parent or sub. And in this case, we want to just add a parent. And then all of the entities that are currently in your corporate registry are here automatically. You can simply link to them and they will be linked automatically. Or you can add a brand new entity. So we can handle indirect ownership where there is a third party that is not a part of your corporate family at all. They can be added really simply as well. And in this case, what we're going to do is we're just going to say that our family office ends up taking a small ownership percentage in this particular entity. And we'll say the acquisition date was 2nd. We can keep track of disposition dates and also make the status inactive. So this means that as ownership changes over time, you can actually maintain all of those ownership changes and run reports and do analysis of those ownership changes over time if you want. And then you can have notes about that ownership. So what we've done now is add our family office as an owner. They own 5.25% now. And now we have 3 parents and 2 subsidiaries. To generate an organizational chart from this information, all we have to do is come up here and click the chart button. Lextree crawls the entire database and automatically builds the database of owners of this organization. Every org chart is different. Before we explore the ownership relationships, I want to point out a few things about the organizational chart. The first is that it is an infinite canvas, so you can zoom in and zoom out however you want. You can even drag the org chart around, and of course you can print it and save it off outside of Lextree if you want as well. Now, I said there were 3 owners and 2 subsidiaries, but you'll notice that there are many more entities in here, and we can explore why that is. If I click on our subject property, Real Property Holdings, you'll see that it has the family office as an owner here. It has Asia Pacific Distribution up here. Now, why aren't all 3 of these entities on the same level? Well, the reason for that is that Asia Pac Distribution is a direct owner of Pacific Refining, which is also a direct owner of Real Property Holdings. So what Lextree has done is it has figured out that Asia Pac Distribution is both a direct owner through this line and an indirect owner through Pacific Refining. And because of that, it has placed it higher in the organizational chart so that we can see that all the generations are preserved. So this is an example of generation skipping where Asia Pac skips the generation below it to own directly. But it also, Lextree knows that it's higher up in the organizational chart because of its direct ownership relationship to Pacific Refining. Now notice, that information was not in the record we were just looking at. So we just added Asia Pac and Pacific Refining and Family Office as direct owners, and Lextree did all the rest of this. The other thing that Lextree did for us is it really filled out the chart. So Evans Family Trust, for example, was not on our org chart, but it's an owner of Family Office Inc., and so it shows up here as well. Lextree also added these other entities. So these individuals, this LLC, Sarah Evans is an individual, William Evans is an individual. And notice each time it's adding people, it's building out the org chart, it's also preserving the generational hierarchy. It even does that for subsidiaries. So you'll recall that Real Prop Holdings had 2 subsidiaries, but one of those has its own subsidiary. So when we look at the direct parents and subsidiaries of Real Prop Holdings, we don't see this 123 Southwest Merchant property or entity, but it shows up on our chart because it's a subsidiary of Downtown Hall LLC. So really powerful automatic algorithmic generation of an org chart to meet your needs. To keep it simple, all you have to do is add direct parents and subsidiaries, and Lextree does all of the rest. It does the generational leveling, it maps generation skipping where that's necessary, and it fills out great-grandparents and grandparents and grandchildren and so on throughout the entire corporate structure. And all of that from just these 5 pieces of information. So that's ownership in Lextree. The next thing I want to cover is the People tab. And People is a general term for officers and directors. Now, in this particular example, we don't have any officers or directors, so let's add some. I'm going to come and click Add. Now, you'll notice that as I add someone to this, there are a number of people already listed here. And what's powerful is that you can assign people to multiple roles throughout your legal entities, all of the corporate entities, and use them in multiple ways. This will allow us to run some powerful reports. So we'll pick Michael Jardin here, And we'll say that he's a director, and maybe we'll even make him the chair. And notice that Lextree can track term of service. And this is really powerful so that you can run reports that say, show me who was on the board during 2018. If you're tracking the term of service, you can capture the appointment date, and we'll say 6/1/2018. Oops. And so that's when he was appointed and started in this. And then if you're in a jurisdiction or they're serving in a role that you know has a finite term, you can actually set a term expiration and then schedule an alert for that as well if you want. But we'll just add him as a director chair. And there he is as the chair. And let's also add someone as, we'll add Dayla Evans here as an officer, and we'll make her the managing partner of the LLP. Yes, I know that some of the terminology I'm using for an LLP is not strictly correct. I'm just trying to illustrate a point that we can add officers and directors really easily as well. And you'll notice that they're already grouped. So my directors will appear here. My officers will appear here. I can add appointment and expiration dates as well for you. And we can really fill that out. And I'll show you some examples when we're going to run some reports of people and look at those officers and directors. So it's really easy to assign people to multiple roles. You can even do committee assignments as well as you're managing officers and directors, and track those terms of service even when they're expired or inactive as well. The alerts tab will just show you all the alerts that are coming due. This is the filing we just set up earlier in the presentation. This will just give you a summary of the alerts for this particular entity. Tasks is a powerful collaboration tool inside of Lextree. So it's more than just a checklist of things to do. You can actually assign work to other users. So Frank up here, for example, can say, hey, I need check on. So we need someone to check on the errors and omissions policy for this entity. And I can assign that. I'll assign it to Joan. And I'll say that I need this due by in a few months. Now notice I can make this a recurring task. And I can set that frequency to the number of things. So I can say, for example, it recurs every 1 year, or every 180 days if we need to review that. So you can set up recurring tasks as well. And if they're long tail tasks, they occur far in the future, you can actually have them go dormant until a certain number of days beforehand. And I can say, hey, it's due 180 days, but I only want to see it 5 days before it's due. So really granular specific control of recurring tasks. In this example, we won't use it as recurring, but just know that you can do it. You can even add documents. So if there's a filing, for example, that you need filled out, or a form of some kind, you can actually upload a draft version or a blank version of that document or form, and that person can access that document really easily. And so here we are, check on E&O policy. Here's the status, it's progress. Here's it's assigned. Frank is the requester. It's assigned to Joan. This is when it's due. It's not recurring as well. So very easy to assign tasks. Once I've assigned that task, Joan automatically got an email notification about the task that included a link to come back in and do the task. It will also show up in her queue of tasks to work on as long as it's active and available to her. And then I can do notes about any events related to the entity. So I can say, completed. Now you might have something less trivial, like mergers, dissolutions, disposition of critical assets, what have you. Any of those things can be listed in here. So those are all the basics of keeping track of a particular entity. So we have summary data about the entity, control, flexibility over jurisdiction, any form of organization, custom fields, tags. We can add lots of detail about this entity if we want, things like documents, requirements, ownership, officers and directors, including committee assignments, even outside advisors. So outside lawyers, auditors, accountants can all be added and managed here. And by the way, they don't have to be natural people. So it can be organizations. So if you have an accounting firm and you want the firm listed and not the individual accountant, you can certainly do that under people, and it will show as an other category as well. Alerts, tasks, and notes about this particular entity. So at this point, we've done sort of covered a lot of the basics of managing one single entity. Now we want to step back and take a global look at all of the entities that we're managing in our entire corporate family. So to do that, we have a number of options. We have everything in this view menu area, and these reports are available to us here as well. So the view area gives us some quick access to things we care about. So for example, we might see all of the alerts. So you'll see we have this construction permit alert that came out on December 18th, and we can click on that, see those details, and jump and view the entity for more information if we need. We can also view the alerts this way and get a complete list of all of the alerts for every entity in the corporate family if we want. Under documents, we can actually access all of the documents across all of the entities here if we need. And we can say, hey, just show us all of the agreements. And this will give us all of the agreements of any kind across all of the entities we have and basic information about all of them. People and organizations will allow us to do some powerful reporting on all of our people. So let's say, for example, William Evans here comes by and says, what boards or companies am I involved in? And we can just say, well, William, you're in 3. You are the chair and director of Family Corp Distributors LLC. You're the director and the chair of that board for Family Office Inc. You're also on the risk committee of the Family Office Inc. as well. And your term expired the first of the month, but you're still active on these other ones as well. So really quick, nice analysis to see what William Evans is doing across the entire corporate family. And we can do that for any of these as well. So if I want to see Owen, for example, he's only in 1. So we have a director of Family Office, and he is an outside advisor on that board. So really nice way to see which individuals are on what organizations really quickly and easily. No more rooting through a bunch of corporate records to find out when people were appointed and what they're appointed to. We can get a list of all the requirements across all of our entities as well. So they will all show up here, all of our annual filings, other requirements as well. And then finally, we can come and look at tasks. And so these are all the tasks that we might be involved in. And we'll see ones. These are the ones that were assigned by Frank. So as logged in as the user, Frank, we've got this check E&O policy. It's in progress. Frank is the requester. It was assigned to Joan. Here's when it's due, etc. So nice way to sort of access all the tasks that Frank is involved with in this particular example. And then the other global thing that we can do, so all these view items give you sort of an access view into different types of information stored about your legal entities within Lextree. Reports allows you to go a step further and actually construct a particular view. So the first thing that will happen is Lextree will display some graphical information about your entities by jurisdiction, by form of organization, by tag, etc. But what you may want to do is come to the entities, for example, and you'll see that we have 37 here. And this looks kind of busy. There's a lot of extra information on here. So the first thing I want to do is clean this up and simplify the columns that are displayed. So I'll choose the columns, and I will turn off status, legal entity, identifier, address, and notes. And now we have a much cleaner display of our entities. Now, let's say, for example, I want to see all of my Delaware corporations. all I have to do is click filter, and I'm going to say jurisdiction contains Delaware. And now you'll see I have 10 in Delaware, but I said Delaware corporations. You'll see there's some LLCs and a partnership in here and a trust. Let's eliminate some of that. And I'm going to say form of organization contains corp. I don't even have to finish typing that. And voila, I have just these 5 entities right here. And if I were to export this to any spreadsheet application or print this, Lextree is going to give me only these 5 entities. And so it adapts to those filters. If I were to remove the corporate restriction, then I would get all 10 of these exported or printed if I wanted. And if I remove that, then of course I'm going to get all 37 in this particular example. And you can run these kind of reports on documents, on annual reports, other requirements, on parents and subsidiaries as well. And then, oh, by the way, when you're here, if you want sort of a full abstract of the entity that you can sort of print and produce, you can actually come in here and we'll look for real. So here's the real property holdings we've been looking at. So if I take a look and click on this link, for example, I get a full list of like all the details in one place about all of this if I want. If I were to print this as a PDF, for example, I would get all of this data. So a nice way to sort of just see everything you know about any particular entity here from the reports area as well. And you can run reports on peoples and organizations as well. So here, for example, you can see all of the directors or officers, any other contacts. You can see everyone regardless of their type and whatnot, registered agents and any unrelated entities as well. So an unrelated entity in Lextree is our terminology for any outside owner of any equity interest in any entity in the family. So angel investor, I'm guessing in this case, is an outside investor that puts some money in one of the entities in this corporate registry. So they appear in the org chart, but we don't actively manage them. We don't care about their annual statements or reports. We don't care about their officers and directors. They're just an investor. They're just showing up in the org chart, and that's what an unrelated entity is for. And then we can run reports on tasks as well if we want. So up until now, everything we have covered has been about managing legal entities on a daily basis, adding new ones, updating information, tracking work that needs to be done to keep them in compliance, looking at officers and directors, building org charts. All of that is regular, routine, daily working with legal entities. I'm now going to do a hard shift and wear a different hat. And the only reason I can do this is that Frank, as a user, is given administrative privileges. So we're going to look at some of the administrative functions in Lextree, just a couple of them, to illustrate some of the power that's available even in the standard product of Lextree. And the 2 things I want to highlight are users and groups and this lookups and folders, the ability to sort of customize Lextree as well. So in users and groups, you can add unlimited users that whatever you want. And when you do that, you are configuring them. So you'll see, for example, here's Frank that we've been working with, and he has admin and editor status, which means he can make these settings changes. He can also change and update data. But if you were to add a new user, and we'll just say, and we'll send him a new welcome email, we're going to make him a reader. So what that would mean is he is only able to view data. So you can give people view-only access to legal entities so they can't make any changes. And then you can add him to groups. So we'll go and update these groups here in just a moment to give us more options here. And then you can actually turn off document access. So if you want Sam, in this case, to only view information and not access any of the documents related to the entity, you can actually turn that off entirely. And you can also turn on weekly task reminders for him if you want. And so that's how you add a new user. I'm not going to save in this particular example. I want to go and add a new group and show you what that looks like. So we have this default group here that's a system group, but you can also come in here and we'll say we're going to create a North America group. So If we have a organization that says we're going to have some entities in North America and only users who are in the North America group can access them, we'll put that here. So if I were to come back and add Joanne, for example, I'm going to edit her record. You'll see she's an editor. She's currently in the default group. I'm now going to add her to the North America group. Notice that North America is now an option here because I added it over there. So you can easily create new groups, and then you can assign entities to those groups. And so if Joan, for example, were to add a new entity in the North America group, then neither Frank nor Sun would be able to see that entity because they are not in the North America group. So very powerful, yet simple to implement security and configuration, access controls for your legal entities and data about those legal entities as well. The second administrative thing I want to show you is the lookups, folders, and fields. So this is where you can customize Lextree to your heart's content. And there are lots of powerful tools. One change here will change the entire product for you. So you're going to make a change here. It means you're going to update the dashboard. You're going to change the entity record. You're going to change the reports, all the view information I was sharing with you before. All that gets changed automatically. So document types, for example, are listed here. So we wanted, for example, maybe we want to add contract as a type. And so we'll add that type in here, and you'll see that we now have contract as a type. And I'll go use that type in just a minute. Form of organization, also fully customizable. So you can add any type of organization you want. So partnership might be too broad for you in the United States or some other Commonwealth jurisdictions. And so you might want a wider variety of partnership types. And so you can easily add those. If you might have just a limited partnership, for example, so we can add just an LP there as well. And you'll see that LP listed now in addition to just partnership. Jurisdictions. So you saw me add Sweden as a jurisdiction sort of on the fly as we were working through another part of the product. Here's that Sweden, but you can also manage your jurisdiction centrally. You can come in here and do it at once and add all of these really quickly if you want to do that. Those requirement types, again, can be whatever you want. You can add as many of them as you want, and all of these changes will flow through to the dashboard and the reports as well. And same with those tags. You'll recall that I added holding and operating and pass-through and taxable as tags and then started using those. And they, again, will appear in my reports, etc., because I've done that. So let's take this document example. Recall that I added contract. So if I were to leave the administrative area and go back to my entities, and we will go to that real property holdings that we were managing earlier, here you'll see that commercial lease. So initially I flagged it as an other because I didn't have the right document type. But now I can go in and edit this document and I can say, it says type. And I added contract as a type. So you saw me as an administrator add a document type called contract. And then I immediately went as a user, and Lextree was already configured with my new document type. So it went live immediately. It's available to me. I can save this. And now it's a document type. And now, for example, if I run a report on my documents and I say add a filter where the document type, voila. There is my commercial lease with document type. So that one change in the administrative area under lookups, folders, and fields set up a new document type. It changed my entity record. It allowed me to change the document. It made my report more meaningful and useful to me. So really powerful customization capabilities in Lextree. So you can change those document types, forms of organization, etc. You can add document folders or collections, and you can even add custom fields. So I referred to the LEI number. It's a custom field here, but you can add as many of them as you want, and they'll appear in the product. 2. So Those are all the core administrative functions that get used most often. There is certainly more available to you, but those are sort of the core features that affect people actually using Lextree on a regular basis. You can manage your subscription directly in the product, just under the subscription area. You can also export all the data as well. I'll just say a quick word about the trash management. So when anyone deletes something from Lextree, we remove it, but we do save it for 90 days, and we allow an administrator to come in here and restore it from the trash. So if someone deletes something accidentally, it will be available to an administrative user to restore, but after 90 days, it will get purged from the system as well. So those are the core administrative features of Lextree. You'll also notice now, because we added some requirements, this pie chart has now been updated automatically as well too. So a couple of things to keep in mind. Lextree's licensing allows unlimited users. We don't care whether they're administrative, editor users, or reader users. They don't even have to be employees of your organization. So if you're an in-house counsel team and you want your outside counsel to be on the platform, there's no extra cost for that. On the flip side of that equation, if you're outside counsel and you want to have your clients join, you can actually set up groups organized by clients, give clients access if you want, and they can log in and see only their client entities that you've configured for them. So really flexible licensing infrastructure for unlimited entities, unlimited users, and no practical limit on storage. It's 100 gig on our base plan, but as a practical matter, that's no real limit at all. You likely wouldn't come close to it. So that at an overview is Lextree with the dashboard, the entities, the ability to access alerts, documents, officers and directors, requirements and tasks, see reports, and a wide variety of kinds of reports automatically built into the product, and then very flexible, easy configuration of Lextree so that you can deploy it and get up and running quickly. So thank you for attending this presentation of Lextree. We hope you enjoyed it, and let us know if you have any questions. Thank you very much.